My vision was completely gone. The last thing I remember feeling were my knees crashing down to the ground with a sudden feeling of failure and misery. The optimistic, determined thoughts once zipping through my head during those final moments were now replaced with total, eerie quiet. A lack of understanding and emotion. We had collapsed, together in arms, waiting inevitably for whatever fate we had brought upon ourselves. A queasy, nauseous feeling dominated me when I had regained consciousness. It had taken me a few seconds to recall the events of what had happened earlier. Disoriented, dizzy, and bewildered, the seriousness of the situation had slapped me like a hot, wet towel. The smell of tar was still present, but I was unsure as to whether it wasn't as bad as it was upstairs, or if I had just become used to it. I assumed my eyes would just adjust to the darkness of this indefinite area, which was deceivingly pitch dark. When I turned around then, I was hideously surprised to see a slab of white concrete, like the one in the kitchen, in clear, plain sight, just as it was in my dream, like a painting set on a black canvas. This couldn't be possible. I looked around this room. That's when things took a turn for the worse. Menacing, brutal, and downright disturbing decorations lingered around this place. Hanging from the ceiling from nooses were dead foxes, dogs, cats, and even small rodents such as ferrets, rats, and even little pet hamsters. Including amongst these were kittens, puppies, and other young animals, all just hanging. Some had their skin torn off, had been disemboweled, eyes gouged out, and their teeth pulled from their gums. All were different and had their own unique treatment. All animals had a look of pure pain and suffering on their faces, something which I never thought I'd be able to have to tell. My eyes followed them down from head to toe, analyzing the torture these creatures had been put through. Puddles of thick crimson blood gathered underneath each carcass, and seemingly almost gathering into one big glossy ruby ocean. This horrifying, brutal image forced me to lean over and projectile vomit all over the floor, making the puke look like it was just bouncing off of nothing. I coughed several times after, spitting up little remains from the contents of my stomach, procrastinating myself from having to look up at those poor animals again. Trying my best to seek beyond the mutilated animal corpses, I slowly put one foot in front of the other to try to find a way out. My sanity was draining, having to walk past it all. Eyeballs, blood, and guts were still dripping from them, with an odd body part landing with a slight, squidgy sound onto my clothing. I kept on walking until I saw something faint in the distance. I stopped and squinted, still feeling a little dizzy from the vomiting. With that, I tiptoed as quick as I could towards the mysterious dot, all the while trying my best not to disturb the hanging animals. As I approached this dot, other dots started appearing in the distance. First tens, and then I could have sworn hundreds of them. After a spell of squinting, I noticed that these were paintings. All of them were the same. Every single one I saw was just a painting of a gray eye, enclosed in a whitish gray frame. Just one eye, which covered almost the whole width of the frame, took up about a third of the height and was placed dead center in all the pictures. I found myself staring into one in particular, even though they were all the same. After a while pondering about it, I started walking in parallel with the paintings. I had no idea where I was or how big this room was, or if this was even real. Was I just dreaming from passing out? Usually my dreams aren't this sophisticated, but for now, I was only focused on finding Emma. If I found her, I could almost assure myself that I wasn't dreaming, as it was once in a blue moon that I had a dream with people involved. It happened, but rarely. While thinking about it all, I kept one eye on the paintings. They started to slowly evolve realistically. The first few I saw were just plain gray eyes on a black canvas that were pixelated like how you could see on the old Nintendo 64 or something. But as I progressed, they started to become more detailed. Suddenly, while still developing, I paused to stare at one in particular. Bloodshot. I flicked my eyes back to the previous one. Perfectly healthy eye. I tilted my head to the one next to it, also bloodshot. It was clear to me now that this was a part of the puzzling progression. I took another look around the rest of the room. Animals were still hanging and dangling everywhere. I was now convinced this was a dream. I'd been walking for at least 4 or 5 minutes. I studied my trail, and the hanging dead creatures littered the room's horizon. No way would somebody go to all this effort just to hang all those animals from the ceiling. Would they? I continued forward with constant alternating attention to the paintings and the animals, looking to suss out an upset in the pattern. It was because of this that the smallest little factor to cause me to jump out of my skin was sheer fright. A ringing. I had no idea what it was, but it was faint. Very faint. Jesus Christ, how fucking big is this room? I started to do a mild jog, but keeping alert in case of some other sinister matter. To my much unwanted revelation, this ringing was starting to sound a lot like screaming as I started to advance towards the source of the noise. With that, I halted to a sudden stop. All my surroundings still the same, the screaming remaining now at a disgusting ambient level. I thought to myself that if I was to get out of this dream with any ounce of sanity, I would need to take this risk. "Emma!" I roared out with a desperate might. The screaming stopped. All sounds of any sort stopped. The room all of a sudden lacking an echo. A silence so quiet it hurt my ears. You could hear the sound of your own bodily organs performing their duty. The faded heart of mine pounding away like it was the sound of a child banging his milk bottle off of his cot. And then that stopped. I was left in this total silence for minutes on end. I tried to look around, but my head wouldn't move. I tried pointlessly running. To no avail either. All I could do was stand around and wait for this mind-numbing phase to stop. And then the alarm went off. Within that second, all the pictures collapsed off the wall and all the animals fell off the ceiling simultaneously. The floor was now a bloodied mess of corpses, ropes, and broken frames. Red paint started leaking from the eyes of the painting, seeping on the floor and blending in with the blood. The ringing of my phone alarm was now monstrously loud, shaking this realm with a thundering roar. The ringing forced me to curl up and bawl on the ground, holding my ears, while trying and failing to just drown it all out. Out of the corner of my eye, a man and a woman as pale as mannequins walked motionlessly, hand in hand, towards my crippled, tormented body, with the room still shaking furiously to the deafening, ringing roar of the alarm, and me now drowned in blood, guts, and glass. My body started uncontrollably crying, suffering through it all. I seemed to have had no choice but to just start shouting, "No, no, 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 no," over and over and over again. Each no getting louder to the point that I started coughing up blood, my throat torn to shreds from shouting too loudly and frequently in such a short span of time. I could now feel the words coming out, but I couldn't hear them. The music stopped. The shaking stopped. I was staring into total black and exposed to total quiet once more. My eyes were now stinging from the acidic teardrops gushing from my face, my lower lip dripping blood combined from the fierce biting of it and the constant curdling coughing from my esophagus. I knew what awaited me as I was about to look up. Hesitantly, I steadily jolted my head ever so slowly up towards the ceiling. My eyes made contact with and were repulsed by the eerie sight of an all-white bride and groom staring into my soul with ghostly white eyes. They said and did nothing for the time that I struggled to get back to my feet. Their heads had followed my every move. Vice versa, I hadn't taken my eyes off them either. Those eyes were horrific, empty sockets of self-destruction. But I got lost in them somehow. I eventually made it back to a normal stance, my breathing as labored as a marathon runner. Who are you? I stuttered. How could I not? I didn't know how they were going to react. You need to wake up, the woman uttered in a monotonous voice. What? I replied. You need to wake up. I tried my best to maintain my current facial expression in an attempt to stay calm, cool, and collected. Please just explain to me. Wake up! This time, louder and threatening, while still monotonous. You need to wake up. Her voice starting to become demented and twisted now. My breathing came heavier. How do I return? I asked patiently. Wake up, she mumbled once more. Wait, what the fuck? Her voice now suddenly worn out as if she was on a caffeine crash. Please, Tim, I need you to wake up. I shut my eyes and imagined myself making it back to reality. Emma, Tim, up, wake, she muttered again, her speech resembling somebody who is sleep-talking. The piano music from my earlier dream started to play again. I shut my eyes and opened them again, and again, and again. I was now seeing the same old blackened room, but a slit of light started to glow in a gap between the man and the woman. You need to wake. Oh, Tim. Hell. The woman uttered in what sounded like a dying last-ditch effort. It was then that I noticed the man was talking as well, but all I could hear was a woman's voice. I contemplated what to do. I put my left foot forward while staring at the light. I outstretched my arm and quickly gathered walking pace. Slowly but surely I made my way towards the light, the piano banging still throbbing at my head, my index finger now tasting what felt like an inadequate freedom. With the two menacing statue-like beings guarding over me, I had felt safe to just now leap into this unknown light. They had made me feel safe. I awakened in a dark room. The only light source came from 4 flaming torches at each corner of the room. My hands were tied behind my back, and there was a noose hooked around my neck. Rusty-colored pentagrams scattered the walls, the floors, and the furniture. I gazed up to see 6 figures standing about 10 feet directly in front of me, their necks pointed upwards in a religious-like pose, dressed in all black from head to toe. Black gloves, black robes, black everything. It took me a second to realize that the banging piano music was still here. I searched around frantically to locate the source and discovered something that is engraved in my mind, even still to this day. Tim, help me, pla. Emma struggling to speak over her mindless organ bashing. I could barely make out my surroundings in the dark, but her furious banging of the piano contrasted completely to her almost total limp facial expression. Blinking slowly and going cockeyed, I caught eye of a drip beside her which was hooked up to her arm. I looked right back at the hooded figures who were staring right at me. My neighbor. Her eyes had that evil texture about them, the type of person you just wanted to vanish. Looking into her eyes, I experienced a resentment like I never thought was possible. My blood boiling and rising as this bat took a step closer towards me. I remained perfectly calm and still pouting an angry poker face. But on the inside, fear was tearing me apart like a clumsy chainsaw. Only a few feet away from me now, Emma stopped banging the piano. I looked over at her lifeless body almost floating on the seat. I squinted once more at this, a little perplexed, not realizing my concerns were about to be solved. They started chanting 4 words in Latin, in that horrible, monotonous tone that I had to bear once more. The only word I could make out was et, which I know was the French word for and. The other 3 words began with P. As the tone became higher and the chanted words louder, all the pentagrams in the room began to glow, revealing a darkened room similar to the blackened nightmare. Dead goats and chickens, missing heads, hooves, and other various body parts, all stuffed into little rabbit cages, all mutilated from what I presume were satanic rituals. My facial expression now no longer able to contain itself. All I could do was roar and screech. Fear had elapsed me. I didn't know what else to do. I looked back over at Emma, who was now banging the piano once more. I noticed that 4 strings were attached to her, 2 to each arm. My eyes followed the strings up near the ceiling where I laid my sights on a marionette, which was bouncing up and down by what I understand to be just total thin air. With the pentagrams now totally lit up, one of the hooded figures ran up behind me. The chanting continued, but the hooded figure stopped completely, standing there and staring at me. The piano music continued down its noisy path. I felt 2 cold, bony hands press against my back. I gripped my teeth and continued to hysterically struggle in the ropes. I heard a whisper in my ear, a cold, almost smoky kind of whisper that seemed to rush through my brain and slice it up. Goodbye. Without even thinking, I jumped up and gave a mighty bolting kick, like a horse to the evil little gremlin behind me. I posed my feet on his abdomen against the wall behind us. My neck now loosened the noose. I lifted up my neck and pulled my head out, thumping to the ground face first. My nose now stinging. I didn't care. I now was fully focused on getting out of here. I rolled over onto my back and used my clenched fists to push myself back up to my feet. By the time I had, the other 4 hooded figures had rushed to the man's aid. As I started to escape, flashbacks of the wide-eyed woman began to appear in my mind. You need to wake up. Running in my mind over and over again. This only made me more determined to escape. All the cages opened up and animal carcasses started flying towards me at dangerous speeds. Chicken claws, goat's eyes, and even a horseshoe had caught me on the knee. I was in tremendous pain, but I continued towards the steps that led towards the door. The violent piano music, the pale-eyed woman, and now the twisted, ringing, flurrying into a harrowing whirlwind of dread and terror. The water now gushing out of my eyes can't even be labeled as tears, as I simply had no emotion. I was simply oblivious to everything around and focused with all my own thoughts. As the 4 hooded figures were now chasing me, I ran into the door, not even a little considered about my pain. The door seemed to quietly dishinge in slow motion as I landed face first into the tiled hallway. I laid eyes on the front door and grasped in overwhelming joy. I once more rolled onto my back and wiggled as fast as I could backwards towards the door as the hooded men ran at me with determination. I gazed at them in unobvious despair as I had now just gave up. My efforts had gone unrewarded, it seemed. At least I had tried. On the contrary, they all miraculously fell to the ground simultaneously as soon as they had gone past the door. Life resumed to normal motion as I watched them suddenly suffer horribly. I caught a glimpse of one of their faces, which was suddenly turning into a burning hot pink and covered in expanding facial boils. Their screams were painful to hear, but at the same time, relieving. I looked up once more above their heads and saw that this was one of the 2 doors that Emma and I had seen earlier before we collapsed. I stood up and ran to the kitchen, remembering the front door was locked, but that Emma had used a picklock to open the back door earlier on. With one last peek, I saw the spine-chilling basement now totally engulfed in flames, with no sign of the repulsive woman escaping. Good. Let the bitch burn. I hope she stays alive down there forever. I placed my hands above the flame of a candle in the dining room while glancing at the slab of marble I had encountered earlier. The smell of tar seemed almost inconversant to me now. Latin writing decorated all of it, and one particular sentence had caught my eye. I couldn't remember back then what it had said exactly, but I remember I instinctively knew that it was the same words. The words had now brought back my recent experiences. I became heavy-lunged once more. I spewed vomit all over the floor, along with a few drops of blood. I didn't feel it coming, but it had not surprised me. I felt a burn on my hand and heard the rope drop to the floor, the heat from the basement now starting to radiate on the floor. With that, I jerked at the sliding door which would lead back to the synthetic garden and eventually to freedom. Locked, of course. I grabbed the candle holder, ran back, and with all the mighty strength of a desperate creature, flung the object at the window, giving it a mighty smash. I quickly maneuvered through the glass and ran and jumped the green, rotting fence once more. Home. I entered my house through the conservatory and went through to the bathroom, my nose now red and swollen from my experiences. Little drops of blood decorated my face and clothes, with a big blob hiding just under my nostrils. I stripped naked and got into the shower, throwing all my clothes in the back of my wardrobe. I wasn't going to be wearing them for a while anyway, I can tell you that. I thanked my lucky stars my parents were gone. There was no way I was going to have to explain anything to them again. About a month has passed since the events I described above. I'm sitting on the couch with my father about to watch RTE News. This has been my routine now for the last month. They think it's for a different reason, but I need not explain why. That woman. Why is her house still intact? Why is she still intact? She seems just as normal as ever, like nothing even happened. I've lost about 1 stone in weight, but why should I eat much? I've no reason to. My life is meaningless. I missed all my college exams. Looks like I'll repeat them in August. If the opportunity even comes around, that is. My parents have been trying to help me for a while now, but they've given up on me at this stage. I've become a statue to them. I don't speak, eat, wash, or interact. Why should I? I know that I haven't much time. Gardaí Síochána have now launched a national appeal to help find 19-year-old girl Emma Townsend from County Kildare. Emma is described as being 5 feet 5 inches tall with long blonde hair and blue eyes. Emma was last seen leaving her home with her friend during the afternoon of April 28th, wearing navy tights, denim shorts, a white shirt with flowers, and a headband with a daisy in it. She's now been missing for approximately 1 month. Gardaí have encouraged anyone with information to contact them immediately. In other news, many people from across County Kildare have come out to pay respects to respected artist Anthony Johnson and his wife Belinda, who both passed away this day 50 years ago. Anthony, who was considered a painting prodigy, would often paint unusual sights, which would include paintings of dead and mutilated animals, close-up of human eyes, and his most famous painting of his hometown with a purple and brown sky and dead vegetation. His wife Belinda was also remembered for her descriptive poetry, which included themes such as death, misery, and depression, labeled in Irish Sylvia Plath. Her most famous poem, titled Alarm, talks about how the many alarms used throughout the years, linking back to herself, saying the poem was a warning to her own mental health. Other poetry would describe her unusual dreams, her hatred of hot and humid weather, about animal instinct, and one poem named Creatures focuses on how any little change to our world could upset the behavior of animals. On May 26, 1963, Anthony had hung himself in his home, while his wife was found dead beside him on his piano. The cause of death were both ruled as suicide, as Anthony suffered a broken neck and Belinda suffered from an opium overdose. A shot of their graves came on screen with the words, Probitus Poetae et Pictori, sprawled across it. I had found out everything. Their story, their struggle, and my neighbor's obsession. Both Anthony and Belinda were seen as outcasts by our town. People made false allegations that they were satanic and made sacrifices because of their strange art and poetry. It was only after they couldn't take anymore and both committed suicide that the town started to respect them, that people realized their talents. I thank Belinda every night for saving me. I fell asleep almost instantly last night. I was sick of people asking me about it all. I didn't want to be reminded of Emma's alleged disappearance. Friends, family, teachers, and counselors, they don't care about my well-being. They just want the truth. That night I dreamed I was walking through a field of flowers. In the middle of the beautiful plants was Emma. her pale skin glimmering in the sun, her ocean blue eyes reflecting her own beauty. I approached her standing in the same white dress that Belinda wore when she appeared to me in that dream. I stared at those big, beautiful eyes. Then they turned pale. All the flowers around me suddenly withered and died, as quickly as the sky had turned into a mess of dark purple and brown. The banging piano music screeching once as Emma's face turned in the same blank expression as it did in the basement. I felt my neck twist down past my shoulder once more as a maddening grin grew right across my face. I couldn't see it, but I could feel. I saw the blood trickle onto the deceased field as Emma's skin turned into the numbing blue corpse color. Emma is trying to warn me. Belinda is trying to warn me. And I can feel it when my neighbor glances at me. I know that she's coming for me.